So again, what we're trying to do today is we're trying to come up with systems to prevent brute forcing our login page, similar to what we saw when we were trying to crack the WordPress portal on the Mr. Robot server that we attacked in our last pen text activity together. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to prevent that from happening on our website. And just so that we're all on the same page, we need some intel, and we're going to assume admin, and we're going to try some other stuff. And we have an injection right here, okay? We can use the raw queue. If we were going to do this, you would want to make sure that whatever your admin password is, you send it in the top 20 words or so in the raw queue text. But I'm actually going to veer away from this. I've been talking about how to use Hydra so that it iterates through each password and tries different users, and that's what we're going to look at today. Hopefully I can get that working. So we're going to make our own password list, and we're going to make our own list of users as well, because to be honest, that's what you're going to see. I'm sorry, not see, but that's more likely what you're going to do in the wild. I've said this many times in this class. The technical mitigations are such that we are very good at protecting our infrastructures. The singular point of weakness in our infrastructures is the human element, okay? People are careless with their information, and they're careless with their passwords and all the other stuff that goes along with that, but they're careless with their personal information. Consequently, if you were going to begin a red team attack against an organization, or even, to be honest, a simple closed pen test of a website, one of the things I would do is I would go out and do some intel gathering. I would just gather as much information as possible, and then I would make my own dictionaries. I would use one for the username, one for the passwords, and just see what happened. Exactly like we saw in the Mr. Robot Hydra attack a couple of weeks ago. Okay? So we're going to do something like this. We're going to launch an attack against Hydra, or against our server, based on a username and a password list. And actually, we're going to mess that one up a little bit. Okay. Obviously, your IP address is going to be different than my IP address. You need to understand your environment. If your form is not using username and password, but you use something like user and pass or whatever, you will need to adjust this attack screen to reflect what you're doing. All right. I have everything in one page. The processing of my login is the same page as my login. If your login page calls a processing page, then you have to reflect that as the target. You do not target the form, you target the processing script. And this assumes that we know what the success is. I'm going to modify this to check for failures. Okay? The -v, we're going to add that just so you can see the work running, so you can see what's happening and understand a little bit better. Okay? So that's probably the first thing we are going to do. I explain all of those parameters right here. And once we've done that, we're going to modify our database. We're going to add a couple of fields, and the default now of last login, we're actually going to set that default value to now. And we're going to do the same thing for the failed login. We're actually going to set a default value to 0, because there is a statistically unlikely scenario. If this is left, it's set to null, and you can't increment null, at least not in my version of MySQL. When I go to increment it, it simply doesn't increment. The first time you log in, it gets set to 0. So in the unlikely scenario that an account is created but nobody logs in, you actually have a vulnerability. So we're going to set that default value to 0. All right? And then it's just going to modify. Now you can do a backup of your website, but really we're only going to be changing one file, and that is whatever processes your login. All the work is going to be done, the PHP work is going to be done in that one file. And of course, we're going to modify our database slightly. So you can back up your site, you can back up your login processing file. You probably don't need to back up your database because you're adding columns and not making any great changes. Any questions? One last thing. As I said yesterday, I got this from the DVWA app. And let's take a look at that right now. Hopefully you have Debian up and running. Hopefully you have your database software open. Hopefully you have Kali up and running and you're ready to go. If not, start Debian, start Kali, start your file transfer software, start your database management software so you're ready to go. While we're doing that, I'm just going to quickly bring up DVWA. We'll take a look at vulnerabilities, and under vulnerabilities we're going to look at the brute force. The solutions are in the source. Again, how did I get here? Go to your DVWA. Under DVWA there's a vulnerabilities folder or directory because it's Linux. Under there is each of the vulnerabilities that you can attack in the DVWA web application. We are interested in the brute force, and in that area there is a file or a directory called source. This carries, or contains I should say, the 4 different security setting scenarios: low, medium, high, and impossible. And I said when we looked at DVWA, the reason I like it, and the reason I like the one that you install yourself rather than the one that comes with Metasploitable, is that it contains a setting called impossible. And when we look at the source code, that was, okay, what happened there? Okay, that was peculiar, but whatever. When we look at this, first off, we're not going to work about cross-site request forgeries. We don't really have time. There is some sanitizing stuff here that's very worthwhile to look at, but again, we're using PDO and a lot of that is taken care of for us, but more is better, okay? We're going to ignore the fact that they're doing MD5. We're just going to let that slide, but this is the important bit. We have some arguments. We're going to set those so that we can change our code based on what it is. And then we've got some very good code here. Note that they comment out information, and we should do that, all right? They comment out the code that says the account is locked. They comment out the code that says these are the arguments. You never want to share that information with hackers. We are going to make that visible during our lecture, but it's on you to make sure that when it's competency time that I never see any of that information. Okay? I really like how they did this. I am sure there's other things out there that we could use. I have no doubt that there's other solutions out there. I really like this code. So this is the one we're going to look at today. Any questions on that? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at hacking our own website. Ensure that you have Debian running. Ensure that you can go to your browser and log in as one of the users. It doesn't really matter. Okay? If you can log in, you're ready to try an attack. And that's what we're going to do next. Okay? If you have a question and I'm not acknowledging you, please do not hesitate to call out. First things first. I have created a working directory called StungEye. I think you should always have a separate directory for each of your separate attacks. BT risks, Metasploitable, K1, K2. Obviously I didn't create one for K3 or K4, should have. Metasploitable, Mr. Robot, and now of course StungEye. Just allows you to organize your work. Now when we took a look at the pen test, the Hydra attack that I wanted to do, I said let's target admin and let's use the RawQ dictionary for our attack. But we're not going to do that. One of the things, as I said, I liked about Mr. Robot is that we had a custom dictionary, and that's what we're going to do. I've got 2 files here, and you can, sorry, I shouldn't swear. I also shouldn't use vi because students get in trouble with that. So we're going to create 2 dictionaries. We're going to create a dictionary of users. You could use whoever you want. This is Kyle's application, so one of the people I am targeting is Kyle. John Smith, admin, add your username, add root. Go ahead and create a dictionary with at least 5 users in it. Please create up to 10 users. Don't go crazy. Okay? Please go ahead and create your own dictionary of users at this time and save it as however you want. Again, how did I create this? I typed in nano and whatever file name I wanted. In this case, users.txt. I type in the users that I want to do. I'll add another one, Jane, J-Doe, whatever, all right? And once I've got my data entered, I do Control O to write out. It's already specified a file name, so it should be fine. Control O, you want to write out to users? Yes, I want to write out. And then Control X to exit. Please go ahead and create a list of users, ensuring that in your list of users, you have your username that you log in, any of the other users you may want to test, especially admin, or whatever you set up yesterday in your PHP RBAC configuration to test access control or authorization. Apologize for the background noises, but you know what I'm like with my coffee. Alrighty, I'm assuming that you can all type and have completed your list. Again, Control O, Enter, Control X. Same thing for your passwords, nano pass.txt or whatever you want to call it. I don't care. And again, we're going to create a dictionary of passwords. Again, it is going to be based on what we did in our intel gathering. Pass, we think admin is a password, admin123 might be a password, admin bang, generic password, StungEye, copy wrong, keeping in mind that it is case sensitive. So go ahead and create a list of passwords. Again, at least 5, maybe 10 lines. Let's say 10 lines. That seems like a reasonable list. That's 50 in total. Yeah. So let's do 10 lines for passwords. I'll do another popular password, ABC123. QWERTY is another really popular password as well. Okay. Once again, I have my 10 passwords. It's Control O to save, Control X to exit. Please go ahead and create your password dictionary now. The important thing is at the end of the day to ensure that whatever password you set for the accounts you want to attack, that those passwords are in this list. Again, I'm going to assume you all know how to type and you have created your password dictionary. Control O, Enter, Control X. Now that I have my username and password dictionaries, I can now target my Kali with the usernames and passwords. And I know what my Kali is, all right? Of course I know what it is. I'm logged into it. It's right there. Technically speaking, I do not need to scan my network for the IP address, okay? If I did, it would be, of course, nmap 192.168.56.0/24, or whatever the network address that you're using. It will find your website. It will show you any services running on your website. Remote connections for MySQL. Why do we have that? So that we could administer our database remotely. Of course, in a production environment, unless you specifically need that, you wouldn't do that. But we manage our database software, our databases with our database software. Specifically for me, I'm using SQLmanager.net. So, of course, I need to open up the port to allow it. But here's our website. Here's our IP address, so we're going to target that with Hydra. Any questions up to this point? Okay, so the command is Hydra. We're going to use a dictionary of users, so uppercase L, and it is users tab. Tab is your friend. We're going to use a dictionary for passwords as well. Tab is your friend. This time, however, we are not going to iterate through the users. We have done that in the past and it works. But I always mention to you that one of the vulnerabilities is the timeout associated with failed login attempts. And one of the ways around that is to iterate through the list of passwords, and then for each password, try all your users. When you are able to do your own intel gathering and get a list of what you think are viable users and passwords, the controls that we often see in our websites are time-based. We also know from our research, our discussions on passwords, that people are lazy when it comes to password. Actually, lazy is a generous word. People can be dumb. When we talked about passwords, something like 1 in 10 were in the top 500 passwords, and 1 in 20 or 1 in 50 were in the top 10 passwords. Knowing this, and knowing that it is possible to get a list of users. For example, this drives me nuts, and we've talked about it before, but if I go to the Red River website, looks like they're actually hiding it a little bit better. Contact. Oh, there it is. Directory? No, that's not it. It looks like they've actually locked it. Oh my God, somebody actually listened to me. Holy crap. I shouldn't be talking like this because I'm probably wrong. I'm sorry, I know I have a lot to cover today. I typed in Google. No, that's not it. Although we do see some email addresses here. So again, it looks like they've hidden the staff directory, which I gotta say is great. But there is still some leaking of credentials, okay? Which is less than ideal, okay? But they've hidden the staff directory, which is actually awesome. I need to follow up with somebody on that because I've been pushing for that for a while and they're listening. Let's say that this was 6 months ago when that was still visible. You could go into the Contact Us page and get your entire organization's email addresses. Well, what does that mean? On most organizations, the network access and the email address are the same. If you can get a Contact Us, you've got half the credentials. And you can create a user's dictionary from that information, which is why in more secure environments, the credentials you use for logging into network resources are different than your email address reflects. All right, my email address is sj@rrc. Those are also my login credentials. If the college was more secure, those two would be different. Okay, so we're going to iterate through the passwords and then the usernames rather than iterate through the username and for each username try a password, because we know users can be lazy. So the -u switch switches it up a little bit. We need to specify the IP address of our target environment. We know that is the IP address of our Debian. All right. The target we are doing, as we did with Mr. Robot, is based on the form type. Well, that's a quick check. When we go back and we check, no, that's not it. When we go back and we check our login page, we get that the method is post. Okay, we have form method is equal to post. We have an action that is login. we've got an input name is equal to username and input name is equal to password. Okay? Knowing these values, we can craft our Hydra attack. If you have different values in your form, of course, your attack is going to look different. But that's what I have. Knowing that it is a post method, I'm going to use HTTP post form. And with HTTP post form, I specify a number of arguments. And if you think I have this memorized, you are out of your mind. My URL is login.php, and that's the action. That's not the form. It is the form in my case. The form and the action are the same file, but I'm calling that because that's what the form calls. Okay? With that, it's going to take a username, because that's what my username field is called, is going to be equal to !user. So whatever I have in my user list, substitute here. And password is equal to !pass. Okay? And we're not going to specify a submit button. We could, but we don't really need to. Now, if we know that success is what happens when we log in, we can say success is equal to success. If we don't know that, though, and we really don't, in this scenario, it is conceivable where we don't know what a failed login looks, or success logs in looks like. So let's say we try something, we log in, and we get this, wrong username or password. That's a great error. This, of course, is BS. But that's an acceptable error. I can use that nevertheless. And a failure is equal to wrong username. Was it case username? Wait one. Yeah, uppercase username. Case matters. So uppercase W, uppercase U. Whatever your error is must be reflected in the failure part of the 3 arguments that we pass to this module here. The module is what we are using with Hydra. This module wants 3 arguments: the URL, the login credentials, and either a success or a failure string. Single tick to close it off, and we're going to do something else. We're going to do uppercase, not C, uppercase V, so that we can actually get full verbose mode where it'll show every one of our attempts. We have about 50 in total, maybe more, so it's not going to screen unreasonably. Are there any questions on that? So again, this is your attack, Hydra-L. Let me collect that here before it scrolls off the screen. Select that, Control-Shift-C to copy it. I will open up my text editor. I will paste it. We will do word wrap. There it is. We will do word wrap, so keep in mind that that is wrapped around, and it should be all one line, just like that. Are you able to make that? I can make that out on my tablet. I'm assuming you can make that out on your computer screens. If not, it's time to get a pair of glasses. Okay? So again, let's try our injection. And when we hit enter, if I haven't got any typos, okay, and I do have a typo. Somehow I truncated, so, well, let's just do this one. Username, password equals pass. Wrong password. Open tick, closing tick. That should work better. There we go. And right away, we see our successes. So I copied and pasted somehow incorrectly, but that is the correct code. Given that you have created a dictionary of users called users, a dictionary of passwords called pass, with whatever extensions you prefer, that is your IP address for your target machine, and these arguments here reflect what you're doing. That processes the login, that's the form element name, and that's the form element name, and that is the message that gets returned when they don't log in properly. Okay? As you can see from our list, we are going through the passwords. I'm trying for each password, I'm going through my list of users. And then when I'm done all the users for the first password, I move on to the next password and iterate through the users. Strictly speaking, not required for this attack, but a more real-world red team type activity when you're worried about timeouts. If you're worried about timeouts, A, and B, you don't need to crack everybody's passwords. You just need to get into the system. And C, you know that at some point, somebody is going to do a password incorrectly. You've got a list of users. You know someone's going to do a bad password. Focus on the password and see who screwed up. Any questions? At the end of the day, I was able to find the password for both the regular user into the system and the admin account. Please trust me that those are the correct passwords. Okay? Let's fix it. Any questions? Okay, let's fix it then. We're going to keep Kali. We're going to come back to it. As I said, we need to make a couple of changes. The first change we need to do is, actually it's better seen in the PowerPoint slides than it is in the Word document. So have that visible so you can see it. We're going to create two new fields, a date time called last login. You can call it whatever you want, but the code I supply uses that name, and failed login with an integer. We're going to set a default value to 0. Let's go ahead and modify our database at this time. Here's our members table right here. Here are the fields that we have. I am going to create a new field. I'm going to call that field last login. It is, of course, date time. Not timestamp, but date time. I suggest making it not null, and I suggest making the default value now. Okay? That's what I advise that you do. You can see this information on slide 9 of the PowerPoint that that comes with this lecture. Okay, so go ahead and add that at this time. You click on it and then you click on execute, and we've got a new field. Again, right click, new field. This one we're going to call failed login. Doesn't matter what you call it, that's what I call it. It is an integer. The default value is going to be 0. All right, again, refer to the PowerPoint slide number 9 that comes with this lecture. Click on OK and execute. So you've got some values. So when we take a look at our data again, these values are in place, plus there's these columns, I should say, in place, plus there's some default values. The only reason we're doing that is because if these are null, in theory, if somebody creates an account without logging in, you're going to have problems. You're going to potentially have problems. Let's just remove those problems and set some default values. Okay? Any questions? Is anybody not at this point? Alrighty. Now that we have our database updated, what we need to do next is to modify our code. This should not impact anything we have done. We can still log in. Awesome. Alrighty, let's move on. The next thing we want to do is take a look at the supporting Word document. Basically, I make reference to maybe doing a backup. We're only really changing one file. So if you want, you can change that login script that processes your login. We've already made the changes to our database. Again, this is inaccurate. It is better to have default values in your table for those two columns. Okay, you can do a backup, and then what we can do is focus on whatever script that processes your login. I add these three values here to that script. These can be as well in your global configuration file. You do you. I don't care. If you've got a global config file that gets called in every PHP script, obviously this is something that belongs in that file. We really only use them, however, in our login script. So go back, if you're not already there, go into your blog and take a look at whatever script you have that processes your login script. Mine, of course, has both the form and the script that processes the form data. Okay. This is actually something I would probably put closer to the top. Okay. Every one of my pages uses a config.php. I could just as easily put this code in that. Doesn't matter. I don't care. I'm going to put everything in one file for the purposes of today's lecture. All right. Up at the top where you start defining some of your other variables to use across your application. Once I've added those three lines, the next thing I want to do is go ahead and set the current login count. So I really need to go through and query my database to see if they've tried logging in. Now I believe I tend to put this block of code, which is most of page 2 and onto the top of page 3. Okay, I don't know if you can see that well or not, but the code is on page 2 and down to the top of page 3. This entire block of code needs to be added. I wouldn't add it up here. I don't need to process this if I'm just loading an empty form. So what I would do is I would add it at the point where I'm processing the login actions. Okay. So if there is somebody trying to log in, first thing we're going to do is grab a user, and then we're going to check the necessary parameters. How many times they've logged in and when they last logged in, to make sure that their account is not locked. If it is locked, tell them that it's locked. We're also echoing out some extra that's not it. We're echoing out extra information. This is for the purposes of debugging our code. We would never roll that into production. Okay, you can comment it out, but I would actually put forward that once it works, I would just delete those so they don't accidentally appear in production, because that's the worst case scenario. Okay, just make sure good. All right. Now that we've done that, we need to modify our check process. All right. If my password hash that I just created matches the password hash that I have in the dictionary, and there is a password, I also want to check for a third scenario, a scenario where the account is not locked. So I need to modify my if statement right here. This is the process. The next bit of code is gathering the password from the database based on the username. And then I need to check, do the passwords match? Is there a password? And third, is the account locked? Because if any of these scenarios up here occur, we lock the account. All right? Oh, we don't check. We check the count and we check the timeout, and then each time we check, and then the account is locked. I thought there was 2 instances, but there's only one. The account gets locked. If it's locked, then we don't allow it. And way up here at the top, we set it to false, and we only change that flag if the situation allows for it. That's what's going on. Okay. Now that we've done that, we need to reset our count. All right. If they are successfully logged in, we reset our count to 0. That's what this block of code does. And this is where the vulnerability existed before. Once they log in, the value gets set to 0. Their last login gets set to a valid time. Okay? And that's great. That's perfectly fine. But if you don't log in, it never gets set to 0 if you don't set the default value to 0. So it sits at null, so you can't increment a null value in MySQL anyway. So you open yourself up to a vulnerability. So we fix it by setting a default value. But we need to add that code after you have successfully logged in. That is my block right here, success, and then I redirect the user to the home page. And before they go, I gave myself 3 seconds. You can give yourself 5 seconds. It doesn't really matter. Update the database. Set the failed login to 0. So reset it, right? Limit 1. It's good code to do. This is again right out of the DVWA example. Okay? So they're not blocked. They've properly logged in. You let them log in. You reset the count to 0. Otherwise, all right, start incrementing your failed login count. Okay? Else, there's something wrong. Oh, by the way, motherfucker. Okay, well, this is going to be interesting. Okay. So in case one of you is trying to email me because they can't get in. Okay, it's not you guys. So I think my Kali, I hope it was my Kali that just crashed and not my Debian. We'll know in a second. Nevertheless, I don't want to break the workflow. So we're going to now update, or I should say increment, our failed login integer. So we're going to highlight the next block of code. And as I said, it goes in the else area. Now, again, I've got a lot of stuff here for the purposes of lecturing. I never want to see that in your competency. I never want to see that certainly in any final projects that you might get in the near future that require you to make, I don't know, some kind of a website. Okay? So again, this is part of the, hey, you're not logged in. We're going to keep incrementing. Even if they go past the threshold of 3, we keep incrementing every failed attempt. And every single login attempt, regardless of if it was correct or not, we need to do one more change. We need to update the last login attempt because we've given ourselves a 15-minute window to lock the account. So every login attempt needs that 15-minute window, even if they're doing it properly. All right? They need to stop logging in for 15 minutes. You can adjust this based on your own needs going forward, but that's what we're doing with ours. Regardless of if they logged in or not, outside of that if-else statement, we increment, or we don't increment, we set the date time stamp of the last login to this attempt. Any questions on that? Okay, we're actually very close to being done, ladies and gentlemen. So, now the $64,000 question. Which one of my systems failed? Of course it was Kali. Kali and my screen recorder do not play nice together. So we're going to start it up again. Apologize for the delay. Please go through and ensure that your code is properly in place. Given that my Debian didn't crash, I can save my work, verify that it was uploaded. It was uploaded, perfect, that's good. It should be in place. There should be no problem with me logging in, log out, home, log in, as admin, log in, no problems, good, I didn't break anything. That's always a nice feeling. Let's log in as admin with the wrong password. All right. I clearly forgot something. So let's go back to my text editor. I forgot to change my message. And you know what? To be honest, I don't have that bolded in my document. Wrong username or password, or your account is locked. You should add some description to the user, but not too much detail so that you leak information to hackers. Okay? Let's try that again. Control R, resend. Your account is locked. Control N, resend. And then my account should be locked. So when I hit Control R and resend again, now, because I'm displaying the errors, it's telling me what's going on. No, your account is locked, and it's going to be locked for the next 15 minutes. Perfect. Exactly what we wanted to see. Okay? Now, for the purposes of testing, how do I undo this? Did everybody get to that point where they were able to trigger? Anybody not get to this point and has a question where they were able to trigger this system? Again, please keeping in mind that I am recording this, so there will likely be a video of me on YouTube cussing my Kali. Okay, I don't see anything. If you don't want to say anything now, feel free to email me later today. Let us see with Kali. Open up a terminal. CD into my StungEye folder, ls. My stuff is still there. See if it's still in the perfect. Good. So before I do my attack, I am going to go back and I am going to unlock my system. Okay. If I go to my browser now, try logging in with the correct credentials, admin, and I'm just going to type it in, PASSWORD. Log in properly, doesn't matter, it's still locked, okay? Because I haven't given it that 15-minute window. Okay, so let's refresh. And it shows that admin has tried to log in 5 times and its last login was just now. Now you can try changing this here, and frankly sometimes it works. If you make it bigger, sometimes it even works better. You can get a drop down and you can change it like this, but that's hit and miss. When I need to modify this, what I like to do is I like selecting the record and going to form view. Down at the bottom, there is a pop-up that will allow you to set the date time stamp. And you can tweak around with the time, or you can just say, set it to yesterday, click on OK. But the important thing is you have to post the data. You have to write this. It's transactional based, I guess. You have to say, write that to the database. It's been written. So now, when I go in and log in again, it will let me log in. It says it's locked, but it let me logged in. The reason why it says it's locked is because it's going over the information from before. But when we actually do it, we are fine. Okay? Another reason to hide those error messages, because frankly, sometimes they can be confusing. Okay? So I'm able to log in. And when I take a look at my data back in the grid view, and I refresh my data, where's my refresh button? Right there. Everything is fine in my database. Any questions on that? Now that we've done that, let's attack again. Same command as before. We haven't changed any of our passwords or anything. Let's see if we can brute force this. Unless you are incredibly bad with your password choices, this is not going to work. None of them succeeded. Okay? Because we've put brute force mitigations in place. Are there any questions? If we try logging in again, this actually took, this was good. This took the right amount of time. It actually took me 50 minutes. That's perfect. If we try logging in again, we are locked. Doesn't matter who we log in as. We are locked. Now, the next obvious question is, well, what do you do with this information? And how do you know you're under attack? I'm just going to take a couple of minutes and talk about some possible scenarios going forward. At the end of the day, if somebody tries to do an attack like the Hydra attack, there's a couple of ways of detecting it. You can build functionality into your login script that says, hey, I have a separate record somewhere and it just tracks all logins. And every time somebody tries to log in, I write to this and then I check to see how frequently people are trying to log in. And once I hit a threshold, something's wrong. What do you do with that information? That's the question. In an ideal world, you send that to either a network operating center, a NOC, or a security operating center, a SOC. If you're going to send it to either a NOC or a SOC, you have to have somebody to manage it. NOCs and SOCs can take responses out of applications, but they are better to take responses from network edge devices, such as firewalls and gateways and routers and what have you. They can show you when you're under attack as well as an application can. It would be better to have this kind of checking on your edge devices rather than in your application. You can build it into your application as well. When it comes to security, it's one of those conditions where more is better. Okay? If you are being attacked like this, you want some way of indicating it. My suggestion would be to do it as an edge device, but you can definitely incorporate it into your application. Any questions on that? This will be in the final exam. What does the final exam look like, you may ask? Well, if you could open up your content in Learn at this point, please. Everybody could take a look at Learn. You should see in the content area, if you refresh your page now, you should see the final exam review, okay? Which actually has a single page, which has some things I'm going to recommend you do in preparation for the final exam, okay? I'm assuming at this point you can all read, and you don't need me to read this for you. You should have gotten a notification from, I'm not sure if it was an automated one or if it was directly from Marnie or whoever. But at the end of the day, you should have gotten a notification that you have an exam with me Monday, the 27th of April at 9 in the morning. And it is a 12-hour exam. I do not expect you, there is no expectation that you sit in front of your computer for 12 hours straight. I expect most of you will be done this exam within 2 hours. A couple of you will be done even quicker than that. I am not going to go into details what to expect with that exam, but you can expect to develop a web application that addresses these different areas. There will be a rubric giving you a breakdown of what I'm looking for in your exam submission. You will have 12 hours. There will be a website that you have to build. There will also be a pen test report that you have to produce as well. Okay? If you have questions on this, please let me know, but it is really self-explanatory, and I'm reluctant to go into greater detail on any of these points. It's going to give away too much for the exam. Okay? So take a look at this. Ensure that you can develop something quickly. If you can develop the StungEye blog software from nothing to these requirements in an hour or two, you are more than ready for the final exam. Any questions? If you have questions and you don't want to chat them out, that's fine. What was I going to say? At this point, I'm done my lecture. If anybody wants to do competencies, that's fine, but I think I'm going to be busy for the next couple of hours. So I'm going to ask people to check with me later this afternoon after 2 o'clock if you want to do competencies or anything. I'm done the formal lectures for the semester. If I do anything next week, it'll probably be on Thursday, just so that we don't have to get up at 8 o'clock on Wednesday morning. And if I do anything on Thursday, I am leaning towards doing the SIFT, the SANS SIFT forensics analysis demonstration that I have in Learn. If you'd like to see something else, let me know. I'll see if I can pull it together. But if not, then that's what I'm planning to do next Thursday. Any questions? All right. Well, that's it for me. You guys can start logging out, and please update and ensure that you have your unique login, your some kind of access control system. I recommend the PHP RBAC, role-based access control system, and please ensure that you have your brute force mitigation in place. Once you're happy with those, we can sit down and do a competency, and we can sign off those last 2 competencies that you have in your gradebook. I know there is a Dropbox folder for Mr. Robot. There is no competency for Mr. Robot. Rather than focus on hacking, I'm going to focus on mitigation with your grades. So that's what we're going to do for the last 2 competencies. Alrighty? That's it for me. I will talk to you guys later.